legendary Pokemon. We all love them. They're on the boxes for a reason, with every game starting from Gen 2. But in the anime, very few people ever actually catch a legendary Pokemon. I thought it'd be a fun time to change that. Since Ash has completed his journey, he has become the Pokemon Master, and the anime has moved away from him, I thought now, what if Ash and all of his important friends had a legendary Pokemon to call their own? Just a few notes as to how this is going to go. I am not making a distinction between legendaries and mythicals. For all intents and purposes, they're basically the same thing. I will also not be repeating any of the selected Pokemon. Once a Pokemon has been selected for one of Ash's friends, it cannot be used again. Another note, seeing as Ash's journey did end at Galar, we will not be selecting anything from Scarlet and Violet. Now, regarding how I made these choices, it was primarily based on three things: their favorite types, their personalities, and their story. And failing all of that, it did kind of just become a vibe-based thing. So there's going to be a couple of those in there. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and move on to giving every character from Pokemon a legendary Pokemon. Starting off with the main man himself, Ash Ketchum. Now, he did have encounters with a number of legendary Pokemon, even not counting the movies. Like, just in the series proper, Ash runs into a number of Pokemon and has encounters with quite a few legendaries. But there's only really one choice that made sense to give to Ash, and that is Ho-Oh. Ash met Ho-Oh on the first day of his Pokemon journey. Literally the end of the first episode of the anime, before Gen 2 even existed. Ash sees Ho-Oh flying in the sky. And he actually sees Ho-Oh at least 2 or 3 more times after that. It's always a significant moment when Ash runs into Ho-Oh, so I think giving Ho-Oh to Ash as his selected legendary is really the only option that makes sense. Now, on to Ash's friends, starting in chronological order. Misty, one of my personal favorite traveling companions of Ash. Misty, I actually had 2 ideas, and admittedly, one of them is a little self-indulgent, I'm not gonna lie. Now, for that self-indulgent pick, Lugia. Lugia is the counterpart to Ho-Oh, which does just kind of fall into shameless shipping logic of Ho-Oh and Lugia being companion legendaries, and Ash and Misty being my OTP for Pokemon. Fight me in the comments, I don't care. But also, Lugia is the guardian of the sea. Misty's whole thing was wanting to be a water Pokemon master, so it would make sense to give her something tied to the oceans. However, the logic of Lugia being guardian of the seas doesn't quite hold up as well as giving Misty Kyogre, who is the creator of the seas. Since Kyogre is literally like the Pokemon equivalent of the god of water, it made sense to give Misty, the water Pokemon master, the creator of the seas, as her legendary Pokemon. So as much as I do love the idea of giving her Lugia to coincide with Ash's Ho-Oh, I am going to have to lean more towards Kyogre. Coming in at our third selection, though, we have Brock. And Brock, as you can tell by his name, if you're not familiar with Pokemon, is a rock guy. Now, there are not many rock-type legendary Pokemon. Trust me, I love them. However, there is one that, you'll forgive the pun, is a pretty solid choice. And that would be Regirock. I mean, it's literally just a thing made of rocks. Like, come on, how could you not give that to me? Now, alternatively, jumping forward a bit in the timeline to Diamond and Pearl, Brock was actually selected by Yuxi due to his knowledge of Pokemon during the whole Team Galactic arc of of Diamond and Pearl. So you could also select Uxie since, Brock does have a story tied to Uxie. But I just like Regirock better. Plus, giving Ash Ho-Oh and Misty Kyogre and then giving Brock a little bit of Uxie, nah. Brock is getting Reggie. Now, starting to get into some of the more hard to determine companions. Next up is Tracy. Tracy, I determined, is going to get Celebi. Now, Tracy does not have much to work with, probably being Ash's shortest lived traveling companion, I think only sticking around for roughly about 30 episodes. There is not a lot to work with Tracy, but Tracy does work very closely with Professor Oak once he stops traveling with Ash. And Professor Oak befriended Celebi in movie 4, Pokemon Forever. So I'm going to go with the logic of Tracy gets Celebi as like a gift from Professor Oak and kind of just run with that. With having only stuck around for about 30 episodes, Tracy doesn't give you a lot to work with, so we're going to take it. Now, moving on to the Hoenn region though, we get May. Now, May and her brother Max were probably the easiest ones to select in this entire list because both of them befriended a legendary Pokemon in the story. It was in the movies, but I'm counting it anyway. So May is going to get Manaphy, based off of Pokemon Movie 9, Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea, in which May befriends a Manaphy. Similar line of logic there for her brother Max, who's going to be getting Jirachi due to having befriended Jirachi in Movie 6, Jirachi Wishmaker. So May and Max get Manaphy and Jirachi. When the story kind of hands it to you, you're just gonna run with it. Moving on to Diamond and Pearl, though, is our next companion, Dawn. And Dawn also didn't give me much to work with. Her team type is all over the place, and she doesn't directly befriend any legendary Pokemon in the story, at least not that I can recall. So I instead decided to go based off of a little bit of vibes and also a slightly deep cut reference of Dawn obtaining a lunar wing in movie 10 and thus giving her Cresselia. Plus, Dawn's whole thing is contest battles, and I do think that Cresselia would actually excel in a contest type format in the end. I mean, look at it. Freaking gorgeous. So, yeah, Dawn is going to be getting Cresselia. There's really not much more to say there. But moving on to Black and White, we have Iris, the Dragon Tamer. Now, that alone already narrows the field. Iris is a Dragon Tamer. She obviously had to get a Dragon-type Pokemon. That said, with Legendaries, that doesn't narrow the field a lot. Seriously, like half of these creatures are Dragon-type. So, I decided to kind of base it a little bit off of an episode that we here in the States did not get. But there was a Black and White special episode where Iris battles Claire from Gen 2, and then at the end takes off after a Rayquaza. So I elected to give Iris a Rayquaza for her legendary, because she has a canon story. Like, she went after Rayquaza, so I'm just going to say she got it. She gets Rayquaza. Now, for Iris's traveling companion, Silent, I'm going to be so real here. Silent, much like Tracy, gave me nothing to work with. Bro does not befriend any legendary Pokemon in the story. His type choice while he was a gym leader was Grass, which not a lot to work with there. There's like 3 or 4 grass. There's 4 grass type legendaries. But we already used Celebi. And let's be so for real, I'm not giving him Virizion. Virizion does not fit. And spoiler alert, Shaman got selected for someone else now. So that kind of just left me with one option based off of the grass typing. And I didn't have a whole lot else to work with for this guy, so I decided to go ahead and run with that. Silent gets Calyrex, specifically Solo Calyrex. Not riding either the Ghost or Ice horses, because that changes the Pokemon's typing to Ghost or Ice and Psychic, thus removing the Grass typing. But also, I just feel like Calyrex kind of matches the vibe. He looks like a dapper little dude, and Silent is dressed like a waiter, which is like, a couple distinctions away from Butler. I feel like there's just like a line of continuity there. I don't know, it made sense in my head. And like I said, Silent didn't give me a whole lot, so I kind of had to take it. But with Black and White done, that means we can move on to X and Y. And for X and Y, our first friend is Clement, who gets Regieleki, because Regieleki is an electric type. And Clement was the electric gym leader in X and Y. I thought about giving him a different Pokemon that you will see a little bit later down on this list, but due to the fact that it was given to someone lower down on the list, kind of couldn't give it to Clement. So decided to go with Regieleki. I don't know, I like the look of Clement and Regieleki together. I feel like it kind of works. Yeah, I don't really have much more reason beyond that, to be honest. He matches the type, and it just works looks-wise, so yeah. But the one that I did have a lot more of a solid reasoning for, Clement's little sister, Bonnie. Now, Bonnie technically is not a Pokemon trainer similar to Max, but also similar to Max, she, in canon, befriends a legendary Pokemon. So she had an easy choice. She's going to get Zygarde. However, I do specifically think she's going to get Zygarde 10% more, one that looks like a dog. She cared for a Zygarde cell that she named Squishy during the X, Y, and Z arc. So I think it just makes sense for Squishy to kind of come back down the line and just continue to hang out with Bonnie. She gets 10% Zygarde. Now, for our last X and Y friend, though, that is going to be Serena. And Serena was also a little bit of a tough one. I eventually came to the conclusion of giving Serena Enamorus, specifically Incarnate form Enamorus, because Enamorus is known as the love-hate Pokemon. So I feel like that's the closest I'm going to get to referencing Serena having that love feeling for Ash throughout like the entirety of X and Y. And I'm going to be so for real, based on Serena's Pokemon that she has throughout the show, she doesn't really give me a whole lot more to work with. Like, she doesn't befriend any actual canon legendary Pokemon. She doesn't have a type that she specializes in. So she's gonna get an Amorous because it fits the vibe. Now, moving on to Sun and Moon, though, where Ash had the most amount of friends. First up, we have Lana, and Lana's logic is a little on the weaker side, but I gave her Tapu Fini because Lana's a water type user, and Tapu Fini is a water Alolan legendary. So that's kind of all I got there. Admittedly, I did not really watch the Sun and Moon anime, so some of these are going to be a little surface level. But I did my best with what I had. After Lana, we have Kiawe. And Kiawe actually is going to be getting Entei. Once again, purely kind of based on the type specialization. Kiawe was a fire type user. But also, I feel like Entei just kind of fits his vibe. He just kind of gives the vibe of like stoic badass type. And that's always the vibe that I got from Entei. So, just kind of works. Next up, though, is Magearna for Lily. Specifically the shiny Magearna that we see Lily have towards the end of Sun and Moon. Since the story kind of gave it to her, I figured might as well officially give her that one. For Sophocles, though, he's going to get Tapu Koko because, at least in the games, he is an electric type specialist. So give him the Alolan electric type. Admittedly, though, Tapu Koko was almost a choice for Ash. Before I elected on Ho-Oh. For Mallow, she's going to get Shaman. Oh, dear, that one was going to come back. Because in the show, she did actually take care of a Shaman for a little while. So, Mallow gets Shaman. The show gave it to her, might as well. Now, on to Go, who also was stupidly easy. Go gets Suicune because he actually caught Suicune in the show. The show just gave him one. I'm not going to take it away. He gets Suicune. Now, I know you might be thinking, oh, but his whole thing is wanting to catch Mew. I don't care. The show gave him Suicune. That's what he gets. And as for Ash's last friend, who admittedly is kind of a little loose on calling her a traveling companion since they didn't really hang out a whole lot, but I'm going to count her anyways, is Chloe. And Chloe... Yeah, Chloe kind of gave me nothing. So, I decided to give Chloe Diancie for not much reason other than, honestly, she just kind of fits the vibe. Like, Chloe has that one Eevee in Journeys, and she seems to kind of favor smaller, cuter type Pokemon. And Diancie is like a smaller, cute Pokemon, and plus they're both pink. I don't know, I know I'm kind of grasping at straws with this one, but like Chloe really doesn't give you anything to work with, so I kind of had to make something up, and Diancie just kind of works. Yeah. So with that said, that is every companion of Ash assigned a legendary Pokemon of their very own. Would you like to see me do this again with maybe the villains? Maybe Ash's lesser known traveling companions? I mean, he's got a bunch of friends. I only hit on the important ones here. So if you'd be interested in seeing this list done again for other characters in Pokemon, feel free to drop that note in the comments. But till then, catch you guys next time.